Hey, friends, welcome to our next module in Global Outreach Fundraising Training, where we believe God provides and fundraising is ministry. I'm CEO John Darnell. This is our Vice President of Development, Greg Beal. Hey, Greg.
Hi, John.
Hey, Greg, I'm really excited about this lesson because by the end of this lesson, each of our MOT candidates and future missionaries will be able to clearly articulate their vision and mission. That's pretty exciting.
Yes, I'm excited to introduce these tools.
So instead of telling you a story this time, we're going to be interactive. Greg and I are going to be bouncing back and forth. And at the same time, you have two attachments there in the LMS that you'll see. One is a vision exercise, and that's where we're going to start. So make sure that's open so you can see the questions we're asking. Also, feel free to pause us and rewind us because really we're going to go through this fairly quickly, but this is an exercise that's going to take you a lot of time to think and pray through. So feel free to rewatch, rewind, pause as you work through to make sure that you have this clear. And as a reminder, in person, Greg and I are going to work with you to make sure these things are well defined. So have no fear. It's going to be okay. And Greg and I are excited. So you ready, Greg?
Let's do this.
All right. So you'll see on that vision exercise worksheet that we have several questions. But here's the idea. In our last video, Nehemiah is burdened. He's praying, he's fasting, he's dreaming about what Jerusalem could be. And you might want to read between the lines a little bit there. He's broken because he knew what it used to be, and he has this dream of what it should be. And really that's what vision is about. It's this picture of the future, this calling that God has given you that helps you understand what he's calling you to, but it also helps your donor understand what they're investing in, what they're helping accomplish. So as you read through these questions, we start with, what problem are you trying to solve? What burden has God given you? Is it something you feel often? When you think of your calling, what are you being called to? What prompted you, Greg, I'm thinking about when Emily and I walked the aisle. We were sent out of a Baptist church, so we walked the aisle to say at the front, God's calling us to Ecuador to do these, and there's that emotion we mentioned in the last video, what are we being called to? Be reminded of that in this exercise. What problem does your calling involve? What are the depths of that problem? What does the country or community look like if God fixes this problem through your ministry? So imagine God does God-sized things and changes a community, a family, starts a church, changes a country for his glory. Paint that picture with your vision. Greg, I'm reminded, as I think about Nehemiah's situation, let's think about that a little bit. I mean, really, what would Jerusalem look like as a result of Nehemiah going and working there? What's the outcome that we're aiming at? So, I mean, he wanted to take a burned down city and disgraced city and return it to its former glory, all for the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that was very motivational for him, not just for carnal reasons, but for spiritual reasons.
And apparently, John, it was motivational to the king as well. I mean, we're going to talk about that in our next video, but it's not only motivational for Nehemiah, like it had an impact on others around him, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, we ask our candidates, what do you hope to accomplish?
Mm-hmm.
Dream, paint a vivid picture. I mean, take the time to type it out, write it out, pray it out. What happens when, the God you serve, the one who's bringing the gospel to bear, when he gets a hold of that community, what happens? Dream about that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first part as you look through that vision exercise sheet and you pray and work through it. Spend some time dreaming about what God is calling you to and what the community looks like as a result of God's intervention. Yes, you're going there, but ultimately God is intervening and transforming lives That's what God does. So now, Greg, let's pivot from that piece. So feel free to hit pause and work on that for a while, as you're watching this video. But we're going to pivot now. So we have the vision, this dream, this picture of the future, but we also have mission, and this can be confusing. And I know, Greg, you and I have gone in circles even at Global Outreach about vision and mission and how to articulate that. But the way that I think about it is mission it's the repeatable actions that bring about the vision. So this dream of the future, these are the things we're doing, the mission, over and over again every day, trusting God to do this really big thing. So if you look at the other exercise, it's an elevator pitch worksheet, which essentially is a challenge to, you're called to this much and you want to explain this much, but how can you concisely express that? Greg, and I'm remembering now, the vision is the inspirational piece, right? And the mission tends to be the informational piece. Here are the facts of the situation that we're dealing with. Here's the inspiration, here's the emotion, here's the hopes in the vision piece.
Yeah.
So we've worked a lot, Greg, in our trainings with this exact exercise. I'm really happy that the people that are going through this training, this virtual training, or the pre-MOT, you guys are getting weeks to think about this instead of 5 minutes, to come up with this, right? So as you open up the sheet, you're going to see a formula that you can use to concisely express what God's calling you. So I plus a verb plus the person or the community or whatever, whoever is receiving that work that you're doing, and then the benefit or the outcome that we're aiming for. So, Greg, we played a little bit with maybe what Nehemiah did. I provided leadership and resources to the Jewish survivors of the exile to rebuild the wall, reclaim their dignity, and restore the glory of God to Jerusalem. I don't know if he would approve of that, but that's essentially, he rebuilt the wall, restored the glory of God, rebuilt the wall, restored their dignity, but just this compact version of what he was trying to accomplish. So what are some other ones, Greg, as you think about this?
Yeah, I think about things that we wrestle with here at Global Outreach. So we serve missionaries, right, John? So what are the ways that we could get in the weeds about all the things that we do? Like, oh, John, I help get missionary newsletters out through the local print vendor and out to their donors. Not very exciting. It's not really, that is a repeatable action, but it's not very exciting to how to describe it. So how do I distill that? So for an example, maybe somebody who cares for missionaries, once they're on the field, we have a missionary care team. Maybe that person might say something like, I support missionaries in cross-cultural transitions so that their family thrives, not just survives.
Yeah.
That provides some inspiration as well as information in a different context. John, you and I talked in the past, one of the traps that missionaries fall into is that when people say, so what do you do in name the country, that the missionary will often answer with like the very technical pieces, like, well, in the mornings, I drive a school bus and I pick up all the kids so I can build a relationship with them. Then I serve lunch. Technical, not very inspiring. And so what if we can then think about other ways that we could phrase the same thing to talk about what we're really going to do? So, another one for somebody who's mobilizing, Becky, my wife, leads a mobilization team. So what if she said, I team up with mission pastors to activate their church in sending short-term mission teams so that they can faithfully fulfill the Great Commission. So if you're working with short-term missions, that's an inspirational way to say it. So I think that's one of the key things to say. This is the information part of it, but it has to bring some inspiration as well to keep the donor interested and excited about what you're going to be doing.
Yeah, it's really good. And I even think about what you just said about I send the missionary newsletters to the printing and mailing vendor or whatever, and I've had that conversation with some of our staff that handles that. And I said, you're not just getting a missionary newsletter and sending it to a vendor. you're connecting donors in the United States with the stories of how God is using them around the world for impact for his kingdom. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're connecting donors to the stories of God's faithfulness. You're sharing how God is working around the world. So that's the same thing, but it's more inspirational.
Yep.
Connect to the bigger vision. But why is it important to share the story of what God's doing around the world? Well, because ultimately at Global Outreach, we want to see revival come to the world. We want to usher in the second coming of Christ. We want to see the picture of Revelation, where every knee will bow, every tongue will confess, but it's every nation, tribe, and tongue around the throne. We get to be a part of that greater vision. And these are the things that I'm doing to bring that about. We're sending missionaries in partnership with the church. So it's that our missionaries, Greg, I remember, being and I did not get this right as a missionary. I think the good news is God is bigger than our fundraising capabilities, right? So, John, what do you and Emily do in Ecuador? Oh, well, we we work at a camp, and I lead the programming team, and we help design retreats, and schools come out there and businesses, and like you can see the donors' eyes like glaze over, right? And they're lost, and God still somehow moves them to give. I don't know how he did that, but there's that. But what our camp mission was, we facilitate a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ through nature and outdoor adventure.
Hmm.
And I think the only thing you could add to that would be the person that benefited, right? Like the person who's attending the retreat. But what's what we want for you? So we've included this resource, another example through some of our global outreach missionaries we have currently. So we have an orphanage in Uganda. They would prefer, actually, we should say, a children's home. So we have a children's home in Uganda, and the trap for the missionary is like, well, what do you do? So the temptation, Greg, would be, oh, well, we have 60 kids that live on site, and we have this school for the kids, and we have these things, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And really the answer, and I'm going to read it directly here, I provide holistic care for all ages of Ugandans so that orphans are restored to their families.
Hmm.
Something like that. Or I make disciples through childcare and advocacy, education, and community development so that we're holistically building thriving families and transforming communities for Christ. So when the donor asks you, or the potential donor asks you, what do you do? The mission statement is the answer we're giving you to help inspire the donor and to connect them with what the vision is and what the outcome is that you're hoping for. Now, when they say, how do you go about doing that? That's where you pivot and you can say, well, we have this school, we have this program. You can explain the details, but first start with the mission statement. And Greg, you make a great point on this front about what this does for the donor.
Yeah, it really puts it in context where they can understand it, right? So, John, I'm thinking you're giving your description of what you and Emily did in Ecuador, and some of the phrasing or terminology is because I'm not in the outdoor recreational camp context. I think I don't really know what does that mean about program. What did he mean about outdoor adventure? Like I can't envision that. And so now, if you offer me a way to say that you are changing your community through Christ through this camp, I've been to church camps. I understand what summer camp looks like at a church camp. I understand what that altar call looks like. I can actually start to formulate a picture of 1,000 words around your sentence that you just gave me, John. It may not actually be what and look like what you did in Ecuador, but I've got it. Like I've got a grasp on what this is and how I can be part of it. And that's really cool to a donor to get a vision of what you're going to be doing and how they can be a part.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's our job. I believe it's Scott Morton who wrote the book Funding Your Ministry. He says, we as fundraisers are holy intermediaries. We're matchmakers between the intentions of God and the resources of the people of God. So we stand in the gap, and it's our job to be as clear as possible to connect what God, the vision and calling God's given us, to the people he's stirring to give. We stand in the gap there, and we're just trying to make a connection. And the better job we can do that, it allows the donor to connect with it, to feel like part of it, and see the impact that they can have for the kingdom. So that's what we want for you as a fundraiser and as a missionary, is to be able to clearly articulate the vision, the mission, using that inspiration and information so that people can have clarity and give, so that you can get to the field. And that's actually what we're going to cover in the next video. Is we're going to look at several passages, including Nehemiah, and we're going to see how God resources his mission